Hello, welcome to this next Substance Designer tutorial. We're going to have a look today at the flood fill node and how you can get all sorts of variation from shapes out of it. Now, we'll start with a substance graph, and before we go anywhere we need a pattern. So our pattern needs to be completely separated, so there needs to be kind of grey and white islands, but there needs to be black borders. And for that, what we're going to use is a cells node. So if I go into cells and go cells 4, this gives us nice borderless kind of shapes. We can move my microphone closer, there we go. So we can adjust the size down a little bit to make them a little larger. And from that, we're going to use an edge detect. And this is going to have a look at our pattern here and attempt to define shapes within our pattern. And we can adjust our edge width, we can adjust our edge roundness, and as you do that you'll see that the pattern adjusts and more things either come out or go back in again depending upon which way you're going. So let's just take that up a bit. I'm going to reduce this scale a bit so that we've got something a little bit more chunky. Okay, so now flood fill comes in. So what flood fill will do is fill our shapes, or the shapes it can detect, with a colour gradient. And we can't use it directly, but there are lots of nodes that we can spawn off the flood fill, which will do all sorts of good things for us. So if I press space and type flood, pick flood fill and then plug it in, and there we go, we have our gradiented thing, sort of red to green, which on its own doesn't really do an awful lot for us. As I said, we need to spawn some nodes off of this. So I'll just grab that node and pull it out and then type flood. And you can see we've got all sorts of things down here. Now I'm going to be working in Greyscale for the most part, but there are colour versions you can use. And one of the main things that I like is this flood fill to gradient. And what this does is our flood fill has found each shape, and then it fills that shape with the gradient. And on its own it's not all that exciting, they're all going in the same direction, but we can throw up an angle variation which will then vary the angle of gradient on each of our shapes, which we can then of course use in some way, shape or form. So I'm just going to put a blend at the end of this now and plug it into a few nodes. So let's plug it into height, we'll plug it into normal, drag and drop that one into the foreground perhaps, there we go. And then we'll just add an ambient node down here so we can see what's going on. There we go. So that gives us an idea of what's going on. It's looking a bit rough at the moment because I just need to set up our material for our height displacement. So I'm going to up the tessellation value, and you'll see that tidies up quite nicely. And if I just up the height scale, we get an idea, or get a better idea of what's going on. And as you can see, we've got a lot of kind of slab-like objects, all higgledy-piggledy, going off in different directions. Now, if I simply plug our original in, we get a rather, whoops, that's not the original. Well, it is the original, but it's the wrong node. If I plug that into there, you'll see we get the same kind of thing, but it's all flat and boring and not very exciting at all. So let me just undo that. So that's the flood fill to gradient, and in the next one we're going to chain a couple of those together to get some extra shapes, or extra interesting shapes out of our pattern. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let's just have a look at our flood fill gradient here. And you'll see we've got like a single plane going on here, and I want to introduce some additional planes. So what I'm going to do is take this one and press Ctrl D, which will make a copy for me, which will use our original flood fill. And then just on here, I'm going to leave all the settings the same, except I'm going to change the random seed, which will just introduce a bit of extra or a bit of different randomness to it. If I switch between these two, you'll see that one's one way, one's another. Although that one for some reason doesn't seem to change, so I'm going to put it up to 2. There we go. I guess there's always a chance randomly that something won't change. Okay, so for these then, I want to blend them together. So we'll press space and blend. And then I'll plug that one in the top and that one in the bottom. And then for the blend mode, I could change my opacity or switch to, say, a different node. You'll see subtract there. I've got some very, very stark differences going on there. Kind of a multiply, but actually I found that quite a good one for this is min darken, because you'll see there that now the planes are starting to kind of add together. We should get, in some cases, 2 or 3 different angles and in different places. You see that, you know, this one with the sort of peak across the gradient is down the middle of the brick, whereas previously it would have been at one side. So let's just plug that in up there and see what that does for us. And there we go, that's changed it a bit. It's, you know, added some variation to our thing, and, you know, made them more, well, stone-like, I guess. Okay, so let me just change this out for perhaps the rounded cylinder. I think it's perhaps a better thing to display this on. So you can see some sort of lines down there with the lights hitting, and yeah, pretty good. Okay, so what else do we want? Well, we can chain these things together as much as we like. So if I pull that down there and select both those and press Ctrl D, I can pull that down there. Take the output from our previous blend and pop it in the top, and then this one I just need to increase my randomness seed or change my randomness seed, so it's another kind of this, you know, angle to the plane. Now you can see I've got this one here where I've got a line down there, a line down there, and another line going off in this direction. Same here and here. Not all of them will do it, but enough of them will do it to make a difference. So let's drag and drop that up into our output blend. I might increase the increase our height offset here, or our height scale, just so that we can get a good look at what's going on. Going to take the roughness off as well. Let's set that to white so that we don't get too much reflection causing all sorts of grief. Okay, so there we've got a multi-angled kind of offset on our bricks, or paving slabs, or, you know, whatever they happen to be that you're making. But we need to add some, you know, surface detail and, you know, some other variation. So we'll start to look at that next. Right, I'm just going to move these back a little. Whoops, if I can manage to select them properly. There we go. And now we're going to take a new node off our flood fill here. So let's grab that point and drag it out, and then type flood. And this time we're going to use flood fill random grayscale. Now what this does is applies a random shade of grey to each of our tiles there, or each of our shapes. And of course we can update our random seed to adjust for that. Now I don't want any of these to be 100% black or 100% white, so what I want to do is just run that through a levels. So let's just type levels there, or press space and type level. And then for the output, I'm just going to take the black and the white and just push them together a little bit. And now, you know, nothing is, you know, completely black or completely white. And now I can blend that in with our output here from our flood fill gradients. So let's press space and add in a blend. Pop these together. And we can try our various different outputs from that. So you'll see none of our bricks are going completely black, and that's because we took all the complete blacks and complete whites out of this. So that's on multiply. Max lighten is too much, that's taking a lot of our detail out. Min darken will have a similar effect. Let's have a look, what else have we got? I think multiply was okay actually. Okay, so let's plug that into our output blend there. And now we have some variation in height around our pieces. Let's just click on this ambient occlusion and give it a little bit more welly so that we can distinguish our shapes a little better. Okay, so that's varied our heights, and I'll just confirm that by plugging the old blend in. So everything here is more or less the same height. There's some variation on the angles, giving it a bit of illusion, but this one actually changes that completely and alters the height of pretty much each of our tiles, shapes, rocks, stones, whatever you want to call them. Excuse me. Okay, so next then we want to add some surface detail to perhaps the spaces between and the stones themselves. So we'll have a look at that next. Okay, so what I'd like to do next is to put some texture over this, and we can do that by adding some sort of noise node. Let's put a grunge over the rocks themselves. Grunge map 11, let's try that one. There we go. So that's quite a fun grunge map. Actually, look at it, it's got quite a lot of brick detail in it already, so let's try a different one because that just might get confusing. There we go. Let's try 8. There we go, it's kind of nice and smeary like that. Okay, so let's blend these in. So I'll plug those together and then feather back the opacity, and we'll start to get some sort of variation across the whole. If I plug that into our output blend, that's what we get. So they're getting, you know, really kind of rocky at that point in time. At this point in time, actually, I'm perhaps want to readjust our ambient occlusion node just to bring that down so it's not interfering quite so much with the look of the whole. There we go. So that's managed to put it across everything, which we wouldn't necessarily want. But we can limit where it goes by using our original pattern as a mask. So if I grab that pattern and drag that into the mask, you'll see that that has had the opposite effect of what I want, because it's putting it into the spaces, not onto the stones. So if I select that noodle, press space and type inv, and then select invert grayscale, now it will go on to the actual rocks themselves. And at this point in time, we might want to adjust our blend until it gets to a good level. I think that's probably not what I want actually. Let's try and min. No, that's not doing it. I think I've got these the wrong way around now. So let me pop that in there and that over there. That's better. Now I can feather the opacity. No, I don't need that. Oh, it's going to be one of those days today. Let's just turn that to false. There we go. Now I don't want to lose my angular pieces. I just want to feather this down enough to get a bit of surface detail onto those rocks. There we go. So we've got some, you know, smooth spaces, we've got some other spaces, and that's all being driven by our grunge map here. Of course you could change it out for another map, but I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, right, what's next? Well, we'd like to put some, you know, grout in, I guess, or some cement, so we'll have a go at that in the next bit. Okay, so putting a bit of you know, texture into the spaces is not too difficult. It's much the same as we did earlier. So we need a blend, we need a texture. Should we use grunge again? No, I want something finer than the grunge. Let's just use the purlin for now. Okay, so I'm going to put purlin in top. I'm going to put my latest output into there, and then this time we'll pop that in there. And now it is the wrong way around. I've got this invert here which is wrong for one thing and right for another. It's very annoying. Let's pop that into there and that will sort that out. And let's turn this back on, and now we should have something. So the difficulty here is that I want everything in that middle part to be kind of the same level. So we might need to put a levels in or do something else. I could take my opacity down and that will fine that up. Of course this is too big at the minute, so let's make that smaller to give ourselves some, you know, rough pieces in there. And now let's have a look. So these black pieces are going to go backwards, and these, you know, lighter pieces are going to come forwards, but I don't want them to come forwards any further than white, so I can really limit that by putting a levels in. And if I take my white output and drag it backwards, let's double click on here to see the difference. There we go. I can really control the level of white that I've got there. I can control black as well if I really want to be tight about it, but I think I'm okay on that one. Okay, so let's plug that into our output blend, and now we have some rough kind of mortar between the two. So it's coming up a little bit far in places and coming back perhaps a little far as well. So again, that's on this levels node. If I pull that back, you'll see it retreats into the gaps. If I pull that one back, it'll retreat even further. There we go. Now of course, you know, this might not be fine enough, so we can overblow this purlin to get a finer noise, and you just adjust it down to, you know, as far as you want it to. So there we go. That's about it for the flood fills on this one. This is only an introduction. There are more flood fill nodes to have a look at. You know, I urge you to sort of experiment and play around with them. But from this, basically, you know, we need to pipe this into a color gradient, which we'll perhaps do next, just to, you know, finish it off. I'm going to drag these back now and give myself some space to pop this into a gradient. So I'll talk to you. Right, so let's pop a colour gradient in here, or a gradient rather, so just space and gradient, pick gradient map, and we'll plug that into there. And then I'm just going to dock this off to one side because I've got an image that I want to use for my colours. So we'll go into the gradient editor, go to pick gradient, and then I'm just going to find a spot on here to use. I'm going to use quite a short stroke because generally speaking the more you take, the more confused it gets, especially as it's kind of a linear thing. And yeah, I prefer to rearrange my nodes or the points on the gradient to have darker at one end and lighter at the other. So let's just move that one up there. That one looks about my darkest. I think that one's perhaps next. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I meant to just grab that one. There we go. I'll just equalise these out a little bit. I think that's probably my lightest, so let's pop that up that end. There we go. I've got a little bit of colour in this one that's adding something to it. If we look at the map itself down here, see it's got kind of a rosy kind of glow to it. That's not bad. Okay, let's plug that into our colour output and see what we've got. There we go. It's at this point in time that our ambient is perhaps not doing us an awful lot of favours, so I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's not the most how can I put it exciting of colours, but we can enhance it a little bit more. So first of all, in the gradient editor itself, we can make some broad adjustments on all of this. So if I drag box over those, we've got our vibrancy. So if I turn it right up, it's going to go real close to white. If I turn it right down, it will go right close to black. But if I make a small adjustment either way, it will make a bit of a difference to us. We can do similar on saturation. So you see that the redder colours are really coming out there. Or I can go backwards and it will go towards Greyscale. And the A1 isn't doing us anything at all. That's fairly normal. So yes, we can adjust that. We can adjust each colour individually. So perhaps I want this one darker. I'll take the vibrancy right down. Perhaps I want a few of these to be darker. Not all of them, just a few of them. Just pop them a bit closer there. There we go. Okay. So I want to put some colour across the top of this, something that's not, down to this map. Or we could use a map that's a little further back in the chain, something that's got a little bit to it, but not, exactly everything. So let's try that one. Yeah, see, that one is not quite right. Mostly because it's not varied enough. So let's just undo those. There we go. I think I managed to undo my gradient edit there. Let's grab those and just take that down a bit. Oops, not that far. There we go. So what I was trying to find in this was something before this node, because that one darkens up some of the stones. So if I take this one, this one isn't going to be enough because there's not enough detail in it, but I can basically put that back into this chain. So if I select these ones to around there and duplicate them, Control D, and pop them up the top there, instead of putting this one into there, I will put this one into there. and that will give me a slightly different output, which may give me a better result here. Yes, see, I managed to see some things then, you know, came up in colour and became less kind of affected by the height. I didn't want the height to particularly be affecting everything. I just wanted it to be, you know, affecting the yeah, I didn't want the height to be affecting the colour of the stones, essentially. But since I was using a height map, you know, that's obviously going to do it. So that's taken some of that height out, and we can further adjust that. What's this blend coming from? That one's coming from there. Actually, I want this one. Actually, I don't want this blend at all. So let's pop that to there instead. And there we go. That's taken even more of that darkness from the stones, which is what I was after. Right, let's try and organise this. It's going to be a tricky one. Organising is always a bit tricky. So, oops. That's that one, so I can delete that one. So this lot is essentially height so far. So if I select all those, right click and add a frame and just give it a name of height, and then this one will add a frame and pop that to colour. Okay, let's get rid of that one, don't need that anymore. There we go. So let's have a look at our colour output. So one thing that's happening here is that our grout is very much dark, because it's the, you know, the height map portion of this is driving that. We want to replace that with something else, which we'll use one of our previous masks for. Okay, so give me a moment and I'll be back to do that. Okay, so we're going to need another noise. Let me just make this a little larger. Whoops. There we go. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's pop in, let's say clouds. And I want to pump this through another gradient map. So I'm going to duplicate this one with Control D. And then replug our noise into there and see what we get. Okay, so for this one I definitely want a change compared to our brick. I want it to be a little bit more neutral, shall we say. I don't want it to be all dark, so I'm going to grab those dark ones there and just pick up that value. There we go. And then I'll perhaps change the hue or saturation a little to give it something of a different colour. Now, oops, I want it to be somewhere down here, so I'm just adjusting until I get down to a kind of a browny colour. I wonder if I can do that for all of them like this. No, it just seems they've all now taken on the same colour, which is rubbish. So let's just do a bit of adjusting. Come on, there we go. Somewhere around there, I think. Okay, so now we've got to blend these two together. So let's make a bit of space and pop a blend in. Let's try and spell it right first, always helpful. And I'll plug these into there. And then back here we have our mask. Oops, let's see if I can get it out far enough and still pick up the end. And I'll pop that in the bottom. There we go, now we've got our different colours in. And let's have a look, see what that looks like. Yep. Not terrific. I need to lighten that up a bit and perhaps change the noise. So let's have a look in the gradient. think I want to take the saturation down. Oh, not that far, that's too far. I'll get there in a minute. Possibly. There we go, somewhere around there anyway. Oh, it helps if you look on the light side, doesn't it, not the dark side. There we go. So now we have it. Now I've got a lot of dark bits on here which I'm not actually overly happy with. So see these bits here, that's being picked up from these. So if I crush these back a bit, I should start to lose some of that. There we go. That's better, a bit more subtle. Okay, so that's really about that. It's not my finest result, that's for sure. Let's have a look at the high-res plane. Looks a bit better on that perhaps. I think my height is perhaps a little over much. Let's edit that. Let's bring that down a bit. There we go. Yeah, so I hope you find that useful. That's adding a bit of variation in the using the flood fill node and a couple of its associated outputs, the flood fill gradient and the flood fill random grayscale. As I said, there are many other ones to do, but those ones will certainly get you started. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll talk to you again in another